Have you just purchased one or more licenses for an AI product, but is now desperate to find the right use cases for it?
Have you been working on a smart niche AI product only to find the market dominated by the big players?
Then you are in the right place at the right time. I'm Swag.
And I'm Becky. Welcome to AI+U, the podcast where we're going to get real about AI.
And we are going to talk about the real use cases, what it really means for us. And we are going to have business leaders, business owners from all over the UK and outside come and join us in this show and talk about their unique applications and the use cases that they want to use AI in.
And then we're going to review a niche AI product live right here in front of you. We'll have a look at what sort of AI it is, think about what some of the strengths are and how it could be applied in real life.
Now, this sounds like a good point, Becky, where we clarify to our audience that any advice or suggestions or help that we are offering on this show is completely free of charge. We are not being paid by any of the businesses or the product companies that we are going to host.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess also just to clarify that all of our views are our own and they don't represent any of our employers.
Now, talking of employers, my wonderful co-host Becky is the head of risk technology at Monzo Bank.
And Swag here is the head of technology advisory at Santander Investment Bank.
But in this show, we are not representing our employers. We are rather representing a growing group of, technology observers or technology experts who are really concerned about the transparency around the AI sector.
And I guess some of the concern that we've got just now is that, everything has been growing pretty fast and there's the potential that that bubble might eventually burst. So maybe we start off just now by talking about what we kind of mean by that lack of transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you talk about lack of transparency in the AI sector, what we really mean is when we talk to the business leaders, business owners, founders, and they are probably the smartest people on the planet, no doubt about that. But they are under tremendous pressure coming down from their board because of the hype around AI. And they are having to show that they are implementing some form of AI in their operations. And because of that, they are have not got the time yet to get to grips with the basic underlying concepts of AI and the products that they're dealing in.
Yeah, and I guess if we, think about some of the ways that we are using AI without worrying about it, without thinking about it, a good example is our, how we look at our emails every day that are sorted out with spam. It's not something that is a massive concern and we're really delving deep into.
Yeah, and there are other great examples, like, for example, whether a transaction is fraud or not. Or another great example is really credit scoring that we have been living with for a long, long time. And we are so used to seeing these numbers of credit scores that we don't stop to realize that there are really complex algorithms running behind the scene to generate those numbers.
Absolutely. And, these are both types of predictive AI.
Right, absolutely. In terms of algorithms that try to predict whether certain events are going to happen or not.
An example being whether an email is spam or not.
Whether a transaction is going to be fraud or not.
Whether it might rain this afternoon or tomorrow.
No, come on, Becky. So we are in Edinburgh. So it's definitely going to rain probably. We don't need AI to predict that. But yes, so these are all great examples of predictive AI.
And Swag, probably the reason why we've never sort of noticed them as much is because they don't have that identity, the voice, the personality.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting and curious point. And that is where the mass psychology, if you look around us, has been so hit differently by the recent wave of generative AI. Because now, instead of a number, what we are seeing is almost emergence of a non-human, superhuman type of entity, which is intelligent.
So generative AI is the other type of AI we're hearing a lot about. How does that work?
Well, it is different from predictive AI. We talked about predictive AI before. It is different from predictive AI in the sense that instead of trying to predict whether certain events are going to happen or not, what it is trying to do, it is trying to generate content. Now, content could be written content or video content or audio content, but content that reads, sounds, feels like human generated.
Yeah.
So algorithmically, if we peek behind the scene, it is different from predictive AI because in predictive AI, you are sort of trying to use this statistical model to come up with a probability. Here, instead, you are trying to simulate from a known real data distribution.
Yeah. And that data distribution could be, billions of conversations across the internet,
Or image databases.
or even something, such as video reels as well.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that if you are a business owner looking for, a new type of AI, then what you really need to start doing is, first of all, understanding whether it's predictive AI or generative AI that you actually need.
And also we need to keep in mind that both of these types of broad AI categories have got numerous different subtypes of algorithms underneath them.
Yeah. And, a great example of this is one of the earliest sort of developed predictive systems, which are what we call expert systems or symbolic AI. And when I say earliest, we're actually probably going all the way back to about the 1970s.
70s, yeah.
When researchers in Stanford developed mycin, and that was an expert system used to diagnose blood infections and to recommend antibiotics with the right kind of dosages. I think then it consisted of around 450 if-then type rules, like if the organism is gram-positive and morphology is coccus, then it is streptococcus.
Right.
And that doesn't sound that fancy today, but I guess at the time it was something, pretty big. And I think, at that time as well, it exceeded the doctor's, expectations. And it
must have been groundbreaking at that time, if you think about it.
And it was easily explainable, which I think was
Yeah,
one of the most
absolutely.
important things as well for not only, patients, doctors, people within, legal teams, etc. as well. But the key bit is that it didn't get deployed because it couldn't fit with the existing infrastructure and systems within the hospitals.
And that is so relevant even today when you are talking about, we are not talking about symbolic AI or rules-based systems anymore. We're talking about the most advanced type of AI. But that point is still relevant, and it's still true that you cannot just do a plug and play with AI. You cannot just think that I'll just take one AI product off the shelf and try to revolutionize the way things are getting done. So the way I think about it is that if we think of the processes that you are running within your operations as a long chain of many different links, and if you want to change one link with a sort of AI-enabled version of that link, it's not simply a matter of replacing that link. You need to rethink a substantial part of the chain itself, if not the entire chain.
Yeah, and I think then there's that part around, do you make a compromise? And another good example to follow on from that is DX Plane, which came around a decade later and was deployed in Massachusetts General Hospital. And that was partly successful because it didn't try to be as revolutionary at the time as an autonomous diagnostic system, and was happy just being that content decision supporting tool. It was also much more kind of effective in being able to provide some of those explanations, literature references when supporting that diagnosis too.
Now, if you think about the example that you gave about mycin and DX-Plane, it's such a wonderful way to show how back then the entire wave of AI that we are facing right now, how it evolved from that time. But particularly coming back to your point about the explainability, that obviously becomes more important when you move away from rules-based system to more advanced and more abstract systems, for example, supervised learning model.
Yeah, and I guess the clue's in the name there around supervised learning, that you're supervising the algorithm by training it on some known examples. The tricky bit is that we don't always know what good looks like. So, for example, if we take, the numerous conversations that young people are having in Reddit at the moment, we might not know what that content is before. And that's where the unsupervised learning comes in.
Exactly.
And that allows us to kind of look and make decisions in group based on content, tone, etc. as well.
Yeah, and again, so like we said before, predictive AI and generative AI, and they have got many different variations of them. Even within predictive AI, even within supervised and unsupervised, there are many different variations of algorithms, many different amazing work on algorithms that are getting done. In fact, in some of the future episodes, we might want to talk about
Yeah, absolutely.
an interesting work that I have been reading about, which is around how do you create hybrid model, right? So you talked about symbolic AI, you talked about supervised, unsupervised. Now, can we bring some of the best elements of each of those together? A really good read for our audience would be on neurosymbolic AI,
Yeah.
which is what I have been reading on. And I think we should do a future episode detailing on that. But not for today. We don't want to get down that rabbit hole. For today, we have got enough material to cover. But the point that we wanted to send across to our audience is that through all these examples, that AI is not just one thing. Even predictive AI is not just one thing. So you need to be really careful. You need to really understand what is it, which algorithm you are buying, and what kind of problems you want to solve with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we look just now at generative AI, we know that the market is, dominated by a load of our sort of big tech players. And, it's got to be because it requires, a massive amount of computing power to, feed that underlying algorithm.
A massive amount of money that goes along with it.
Yeah, storage, etc., everything else too. But, the problem is that they're trying to be the jack of all trades. They're trying to kind of master everything all at the one time. And actually what we probably really need is that more specific use case, in that scenario. I think, take an example like a customer service agent, for example. We don't need that to know Shakespeare in a great amount of detail. It needs to be specific to that case.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's so true. So if you stop and think about it, do you really want your customer service agent to know everything that is there outside?
Yeah.
You need it to know enough to do the job it is required to do, right? And that is sort of a good segue into the other type of generative AI that we probably do not get to hear a whole lot about other than LLMs. Our feeds are full of LLMs. But there is silently a lot of work getting done on small language models as opposed to large language models. And they're, again, no surprise, called SLMs. In my view, and time will tell, but I think in coming years, we are going to see more return on investment coming through from SLMs than LLMs. And precisely because of the reason that you mentioned, that they know exactly what they need to do. So you don't need to feed and train them on the entire internet. And they can work with a much narrower set of data. They can work with a much narrower set of parameters. So what that means is that you don't need to sort of spend millions, billions on tuning them, training them. And then when it comes to actual application, it is as effective and, in fact, more effective than LLMs on the specific applications that they were meant to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, what you're saying is that we should really be focusing on the specific use case and what is needed for that specific context.
And I guess that's the message that we wanted to sort of share with this show, that with the business owners and the business leaders and even with some of the product developers, that it is really important to know the specifics.
Yeah.
It is really important to know the details of where you are going to use a particular algorithm.
Yeah. And that then gives the space for some of the more smaller tech startups or scale-ups, to come into the market. Are you, seeing some of these conversations emerge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think emerge is the right word, right?
Yeah.
So historically speaking, when the entire wave of AI, generative AI rather, hit us, at that point, probably not so much, because deliberately some of these product developers tried to position themselves as part of the wave to get that initial uplift. But now, as the wave is maturing somewhat, they are finding themselves in a somewhat challenging position, because they have positioned themselves as yet another AI product in the market, they are up against the uphill battle, challenging them against the big tech players, right? And it's always going to be hard. So now I think the realization is coming to most of these people, and again, they are really smart people, that they need to position themselves in a much niche area where they are focusing on the particular applications that their products are there to help. and not just yet another AI solution.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fortunately today, Swag, we've got somebody who has tons of insights to share with us on this topic. Aside from his amazing career as a technology consultant, he has co-founded Business AI Alliance, an advisory group. So we have Colin Carmichael with us today. Welcome, Colin.
Morning. Thanks for inviting me to the conversation this morning.
So, Colin, I'm sure our audiences would really be intrigued to know a bit more about BIAIA. If you could give us some detail and flavour about it.
Okay, great. So I'm a partner at Foremost Analytics. We're a SME, small to medium-sized enterprise. The Business AI Alliance actually was formed because there wasn't a collective voice, or we didn't perceive to have a collective voice into government and the policy-making decisions. So we formed this alliance of SME companies who are all AI experts, and we can take this collective voice into government and start to make a bit of a difference. We are very lucky. We've got two of the Lords who are very, very engaged. We've got Lord Ian McNichol, who used to run the Labour Party. He was a General Secretary of the Labour Party for many years, and Lord Colville Ranger. He's the Tories. We also have one or two other peers in the background, but they're not as prominent, but they are helping. So we do have direct access, and they're very, very engaged and focused on helping us take those messages in. It's pretty key that the message really of the Alliance, it's about what is it that will unblock the roadblocks that we see in our way. It's about growth. I mean, a lot of the narrative coming out from government was very negative, I would say. It's all about safety. It's all about job erosion. But actually, our view is it's about growth. There's opportunities here if we get the right support, especially from government, and we have the right brains in the UK focusing on how we help each other grow our organisation. So that's really, hopefully that sort of explains it a little bit.
Yeah, no, amazing. Sounds super exciting. And I guess it'd be great for us to kind of hear a bit about what inspired you to start as well.
As any great sort of startup happens, it was a pub conversation, and we're having a little bit of a moan, to be honest, about, again, going back to my point, I think the big tech companies, and a lot of American ones, as we're probably aware, as well as the large corporates, probably have the ear of the government. Again, going back to my point, this needed to be rectified. We actually need a common voice, and it was really, we need to challenge that. It's if the government's setting the agenda for the UK to grow, how are we possibly going to get the next new unicorns coming out of our SMEs if they're not at the table helping government, as I said earlier, unblock some of the roadblocks that are in their way? So it was really a little bit of a moan in a pub, and I took that into the House of Lords, and they agreed with us. And said this is a great time to kind of push forward.
Super.
Yeah, and you mentioned government's efforts and focus right now. So we have been reading the recent report that the Office of National Statistics in the UK released. And it states something quite interesting. It says that 23% of the businesses are using, and again, I'm quoting, some form of AI, and we'll come back to that phraseology. But on the ground, when you talk to some of the businesses in the UK, does that sound about right to you? Does that resonate to you?
So the thing is with AI, there are so many statistics and so many papers. Yeah. And I think we can all see in the last, let's say through 2025, a lot of organisations have really got on the AI bandwagon. And it's really, the key starting point is really, let's just get generative AI pushed out into our organisations, get some champions across those organisations, and then start to work out the use cases. But I think just general familiarity across organisations was kind of the key starting point. I think the Business AI Alliance, actually, it's not just, it's a collaboration of many companies. We've actually got some banks in there as well, and many other organisations. So it's not just product companies. We've got banks, etc. And some of the smaller banks probably having similar challenges. If you look at the large banks, they've got a lot of money behind AI. They've got a lot of people behind AI, and as I said, they've got the ear of government. But actually, the smaller banks, they're actually trying to. You touched on this about 10, 15 minutes ago, is trying to get their message across. You've got a lot of pressure on you in a small business to kind of drive an AI strategy and be successful. But there's also a lot of blockers within an organization because there's other priorities within the organization. So anyway, the starting point has been introduce Gen AI, and let's just get everyone upskilled as best as they can. The outstanding challenge, I guess, with a lot of firms at the moment is how do we scale it? A lot of organizations, and you've got the big firms are especially hit by this, they don't have the building blocks in place. So how do we grow AI use cases, not just from a proof of concept? It needs to go to a minimum viable product or into a production state. Having the building blocks, that's getting your target operating model right, because it's going to be a new target operating model where the bank or organizations work much, much closer together. You've got to get the governance right. You've got to get your data right. You've got to get security. You've got to be resilient. It's got to be scalable. And that's the big challenge that we see today. And the stats there are pretty high on, like they say that 95% of firms have not sort of achieved this yet. So that's the big focus at the moment.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it gets quite interesting as well when we start to look at the SME sector. There's a separate report that I think it was YouGov this year published, which stated around 31% of SMEs are again using some form of AI, but a lot of these cases are sort of dominated by software and marketing firms. And then if we look at the manufacturing, retail sectors, they seem to be lagging way behind. Do you see that as sort of a gap, an opportunity? And maybe what are some of the challenges for those kind of sectors in AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to be honest, I can't really talk with much authority on that because I don't work in that sector. But what I can say is the community, we've got about 250 companies from all over the UK and all sectors. But I mean, to be honest, if we want to get a bit more information back on how they're seeing the challenges, I would love to take that message out to the community if you're open to that. But today I can't answer that.
That would be amazing, and for sure we are going to have many members of the BAIA community joining this show in future episodes. So we need to sort of watch out for that as well, and hopefully you'll get more insight. But I think to our audiences as well, our message would be that if you have got real experience of dealing with AI, and if you are in some of these sectors, and if you are aware of some of the challenges that are there in the sector that might be creating issues, feel free to put a message and a comment down below, and we'll be happy to pick it up. Now, let's go back to the point about what I was saying about some form of AI, right? And we have been discussing this before you joined, Colin, about the transparency around what is AI, what are the different types of AI, et cetera, et cetera. So do you feel that we are using AI in the right way when we are sort of choosing applications? Are we using AI to do things we have already been doing, but now we want to sort of do things with greater efficiency? Or do you think that we can branch out into more matured applications where we are finding use cases that we have not been doing but can do now?
Yeah, like it's a big question. I mean, I think we were talking before this session. That's probably something that a futurist could probably talk about a little bit more detail than I can. If you think about the AI, though, AI, as we all know, has been around for many years, hasn't it? It's machine learning, and it's just evolved. Now we've got generative AI. It kind of flipped the market 3 years ago, as we all know. But also, if you think about it, what's AI doing at the moment? It's making everyone's jobs more efficient. So what efficiency is going to be put in place? Well, how do we automate? It's another form of automation and efficiency which goes on top of what we already had before. Before we would use database programming languages to make more efficient decisions on processes. You'd be bringing in robotic process automation. There were so many other ways of doing things better. Now we've got generative AI. It just adds another layer. And a lot of organizations are obviously addressing that. Most of the use cases that we see at the moment are probably internally focused, so anything outwardly focused, which is going to be impacting customer or regulation, let's say, then I think some of the sectors is a little bit more challenging at this point in time. So a lot of the use cases that are happening are internal production, efficiencies, I suppose, efficiency gains within organisations. So,
Right.
but but as far as the future's concerned, I wish I had the answer to that. I wish I had a crystal ball. Unfortunately, I don't specialise in that area, but maybe we can bring someone in at a later date who does.
In a way, we are all searching for an answer to
Yes,
that.
we
I
are.
think so.
And I think some of the startups in the community, I'm assuming, will have some amazing ideas. I'd love to hear from them and what's going to be sort of groundbreaking in the future. So,
and hopefully we'll get to hear some of those applications in this show in future episodes. And again, our message to the audience would be, please do reach out to us if you can think of an application of AI in your particular area, which is sort of out of the way, which is unique in its own way. We'd be happy to host you and talk more about it. But I think coming back to the YouGov report that Becky was mentioning, one thing that sort of jumps up from there, and which is sort of related to the previous point as well, to be able to use AI as effectively as possible, we need more awareness within the user community about what AI really is and what it does and what it can do for you. And again, we have different types of AI and all have different types of areas of application. Do you see that education and awareness bit is a real opportunity for something like BAIA to focus on, and in general for us to focus on?
yeah, education is a huge thing for the UK at the moment, and it's got a big focus, but from government actually. One of the core pillars in the Business AI Alliance is education. But how far can we go? Like a lot of the large corporates, their boards need educated in AI. So that's definitely, and that, in fact, not just large companies, small companies, all companies. So we start with the corporates we've got today. They need educated. Lots of our, 60-70% of our business in the UK are small to medium-sized enterprises, of which a vast majority of them will not be even thinking about AI. They wouldn't even have a clue where to start. What's kind of happening though across the UK, there are a number of organisations and even service companies now that are spinning up to support companies who want to go on that journey. But actually, in Scotland itself, the Scottish Government set up the Scottish AI Alliance, and they've created what's called the AI Playbook, and that's specifically focused at for small SMEs. And really, what that's effectively doing is, if you're even starting to consider your roadmap for an AI strategy, where do you begin? Well, it's demystifying a little bit. Yeah. It's probably pointing you in the direction of where you need to start thinking about maybe doing your own research to start off with. But also, it will. I'm not saying the Scottish AI Alliance alone is doing this. Many companies are doing this, but there are also organisations that will point you to the direction of any experts out there in the UK market that can help you. So if you need a little bit of consulting advice just to get up and running, some are very affordable, I would say, others probably not so, but there is a lot of work going on there. But I do think there's so much more that's going to happen here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, like you said, it's that, that first step, getting people on that first, part of trying to understand, lifting the lid off a little bit, which is helpful. When you talk to businesses, do you find that there's concerns just now around things such as data privacy, security? Are you seeing that as something which is emerging as well?
I think it is. I mean, when I first got in, excuse me, I'm getting rid of this cold at the moment. When I first got into Business AI Alliance, we think about it, it was all about like privacy, and so I said that earlier. It's still a big concern. In fact, even in the ministers at times when they're talking about AI, it's a bit schizophrenic. They go out with very positive messages about growth, and then they talk, but it has to be done safely and worry. And it's like you've just contradicted what you just said there. Can you just stick to the narrative? We've got to be positive. So I think a lot of the large corporates will have a lot, as I said before, money and people they throw at it. I mean, to the point where there's maybe a bit of analysis paralysis would go on, because how do you actually implement? Some of the smaller companies, from what I'm seeing, they'll probably just beg for forgiveness. So they'll crack on. They'll do the best they can with the information they've got, maybe bring in a bit of expertise when they need it, but they'll crack on, and if something goes wrong, they'll just have to fix it there and then. So I think everyone's just finding their way. There is no real answer to this yet. In the UK, as we know, we're not aligned to the EU AI Act. We've got our own sort of version more aligned to our local regulators. So they're the principles that we follow here. But actually, as a small organisation, would you even know that? Probably not. You'd have to do a lot of research or get a lot of advice. So I think it's just crack on. If you hit some hurdles, you'll probably just need to address those hurdles at that point and just hope that it's not had much of a customer or detriment to your business when it happens. But I think that's probably this is my view anyway. That's probably what I see is happening at the moment.
So, Colin, if we switch now to start to think about the perspectives of some of the smaller and medium UK-based tech companies, a lot of what we're hearing is around the big multinational tech firms. Are you seeing a sort of rising interest to engage with smaller UK native tech firms? It'd be great if you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, it's really important. This SME market we've talked about, it's a hugely important part of our ecosystem in the UK. There's probably a couple of things to touch on. First of all, sovereign AI, big hot topic. We've got such a reliance geopolitically on the global tech providers. But what if something politically does happen at a global level and that will impact the UK? We've got so much reliance. The whole world is relying on global support. But from an AI perspective, surely we should be doing a lot more on our own and building our own solutions for the UK, focused on the UK, which we can then sell abroad. So there's a big focus on that. The next thing is, the great thing about the UK, again, is we've got a fantastic public sector, and there are lots of challenges in that public sector. Unfortunately, the procurement process today goes against a lot of the smaller businesses. The government has been trying to address that, and I think Scotland's actually a little bit better at it than down south, to be fair. But the reality is a lot of the big tech companies still get the big contracts. So it doesn't give the opportunities to the smaller businesses to go in and support the government and scale. We do need to address it. Whether government has to force stronger relationships between big companies and small companies to make it happen, instead of just giving it straight to the big companies, or there are other ways we address it here, it does need to be sorted out. And I think that's a great way for us to scale. Let's fix some of the problems we've got in the UK, give some of this work to some of the smaller companies, and then once we've actually succeeded in building those products, we can then go and sell that to the world. So that can only be a good thing, surely. That is one of the probably key topics that we're going to be taking into the government. We're in the process of pulling together our... it's not about bashing government, actually. It's about working with government to come up with solutions and answers here, really. But that's one of the kind of core things we're going to be looking at this in Q1 of 2026 with the Alliance, actually.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely quite interesting and something that we would keenly watch out for in terms of progress. Now, if we talk about AI adoption, and I think, Colin, you talked about it briefly earlier as well. If we talk about AI adoption, both from the perspectives of small and medium business users, as well as small and medium tech providers, scale and scalability is a massive challenge compared to some of the bigger players, right? Be it governance, be it controls, etc. How do you see some of the smaller and medium-sized players adopting to it? Is there any...
Well, look, there's always winners and losers in this space, right?
Yeah,
so there are
always.
companies that will work it out. There will be companies that will work it out with help and support from an alliance like ourselves or other organisations out there who are there to help them. But it is a challenge. We saw that with the fintechs, especially around the open banking area, like back in the mid, well, let's say 5-10 years ago, everyone was competing with the same products. It was market saturation. This is happening again in generative AI. There's a lot of companies doing the same thing. So, but it is difficult. But I mentioned earlier, we need to rethink how we can support those companies, and if we can actually get the government forcing the hand of the big tech providers to work closely with some of the smaller tech providers, because the big tech don't need to be doing everything. How do we work more closely with them and help? And just everyone needs to help each other scale up. I think that for me is a really important thing that we need to fix. Otherwise, Keir Starmer's AI strategy, it's not really going to get very far, to be honest, because we keep handing the money away to the big American, let's say, tech providers. We need to fix this big problem area at the moment.
Yeah. And do you see different public-private partnerships like universities, et cetera, playing a role in that?
Yeah, 100%. They always do, and they are there. There's a lot of money getting pumped into this, and there has been for many years. But again, reality is it working? I would say probably not. UK is doing okay. If you compare ourselves globally, at the moment, we're doing okay. But as I said, we are going to be caught up and overtaken by many countries who are just a bit more fluid and a bit more flexible than us. And possibly they're a bit more collaborative. And, you know, we do know some countries in the world don't have the same supply chain, decision-making, planning processes that we have in government. A lot of the European countries do, and then the European countries have got the EU AI Act on top to deal with. But we do have the kind of planning decision process in the UK needs to be addressed. That's that harmony between the central and regional government decision-making to get things done. That could be around data centres. It could be around investments into universities. It could be into small, building out use cases around small language models for the government sector. We could build our own data centres specifically on that subject itself. And instead of having the problems around latency that we've got today in Scotland, actually we get around that because the data centres are on the doorstep of Scotland where all their providers are. So we could potentially, you know, that is an idea. That's just my idea as I'm talking now, but possibly these are discussions that we should be having.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are aware of many really, really interesting work in terms of algorithm research and as well as hardware research that is going on within the academy and within Scottish Academy. And I think, Becky, one of the things that we are planning to do is to put some spotlight in future episodes on some of those work that is getting done. Yeah. That would be amazing.
There was a great report came out last week, actually, I was reading, about how many companies came out of universities. And to be honest, I was quite surprised. I'll dig out the paper and send it on to you offline. You can maybe share with your audience. But it was a smaller number than I was expecting, actually. And to be honest, the cluster of universities in the UK was quite small. There was probably about 4 or 5 universities that were the most successful. And then the rest of them were just playing a bit of catch-up, which surprised me when I was, especially because we were based in Scotland, I was expecting to see a little bit more success in that paper from some of our Scottish universities, especially the government has been putting in quite a lot of support into the Scottish market around universities and support. So something I'd love to understand a bit more. Why was that report not as prominent as I was expecting it with that big 4 or 5 universities?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It'd be great to hear a bit more about that if you could share.
Yeah, I'll dig out the article.
So I guess, you know, Colin, in terms of an investment model, what would be your advice to businesses? Should they be relying on AI as a service, or should they be trying to build some of that capability internally?
So, yeah, is this a conversation that's
a hard question as well?
It's a tough one, but personally speaking, there's two schools of thought in this, isn't there? It's like, do you build your own or do you outsource it to somebody else? I think it's somewhere in the middle. A lot of firms I know on AI, they'll probably looking at their use case, their problem areas, and then they'll go out and find a provider that will address that use case, which is great. And I think probably that will continue. But actually, you probably want to think about how do you build up your own capability in-house. If you think about if you're buying a solution for one use case and you had 10, 12, 15 use cases, you could spend an awful lot of money on third-party vendors. And also you're outsourcing the problem in many respects to them. So you've got a bit of a key company dependency on it, third-party risk, etc. But if you're actually able to build your own team, some of the team probably can sort of address more holistically some of the use cases themselves. So I don't think there's a real easy answer. I mean, what I've just said does contradict a little bit, because I would like to see some AI firms growing exponentially, but a lot of firms themselves need to kind of invest in their own people. I think it's a balance of both, and it would be my
It's
view.
always tricky trade-off, right? So, and I suppose the balance would depend on individual cases, right? Where the individual company is in their growth strategy, in their overall strategy and marketplace.
Yes, and perhaps it's let's get companies in to support the kind of short to medium term, but the intention is it's all about upskilling and making sure they're going to be able to support themselves longer term. That's going to be crucial. Some firms just don't want that, and they don't want the hassle and the problem, so they'll just outsource the problem entirely. So that's okay as well. But
yeah, absolutely. And this is where it becomes important to talk to people, talk to experts, and take advice, and then implement accordingly, rather than sort of playing from a script.
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's time for the last verdict, Colin. According to you, should the UK businesses continue to invest more in AI in next 3 years?
100% they do. I mean, it's an obvious answer. I mean, just make sure you know what you're buying. It's focus on the use cases, focus on the value. It's been quite experimental, but I think 2026 is going to be quite interesting, because I think a lot of companies are getting their head around what to do with it. But it's all about, right, where's the value set in the AI, and how do we start to push on? But yeah, it's not going to go away, is it? It's here to stay. We just have to accept it and embrace it and get on the bandwagon. Simple as that.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that, Colin, and thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
along to the show
No problem
today.
at all. That's nice to be here.
Super.
Right. So I think, Becky, from next episode onwards, we are going to have a product review segment at this point. We don't have a product review today. But what we really want to do from the next episode onwards is to have, I think we all heard Colin talk about the wonderful work that some of the niche UK-based players within the tech sector are doing. So we'll try to bring some of those work into the spotlight, both from the industry as well as from academia, and try to break them down step by step so that we can understand what kind of AI, as we were saying before, what kind of AI, what kind of algorithm they are using, and what is the particular use case that they are best suited for.
Yeah, and obviously we do that in collaboration with the developers as well, just to make sure that we give the right transparency. So if you've got a niche AI product that you'd like us to review, please do get in touch. Our socials are down below.
Perfect. But now that you have got some time, Becky, and I'm going to sort of throw you on the limelight, I'm sure all of us are starting to use generative AI in some form in our personal life as well, not just in the workplace. What's your experience of using generative AI? Like, what do you use it the most for?
Yeah, good question. I think, have been using a lot more of it over the last sort of 6 months to a year. Outside of work, I think I almost think of it as sort of like a second brain in a way. It can help me do things where, potentially I just need a bit more support. So it might be something as simple as what meals I need to cook for the week. Maybe I've got some ingredients in the fridge and I plug that in and it can come up with some ideas.
That's an amazing use case.
Of what I can feed my kids. Or, for example, as well, trying to book a holiday recently, thinking there's loads of different options. Can I plug this all in and, get some real help in figuring out what the best solution is based on holidays, different flight times, etc. as well. I think there's some just really simple use cases in your personal life that using that generative AI can help so much.
Yeah, and they're all very simple. But if you think about it, since 2019, we have seen that when ChatGPT got released. From then till now, how far we have come. So to the point that we are starting to use AI in some shape or form in our personal life, in very simple things, but very detailed stuff in our lives. But particularly for creative purposes, do you feel that your own creativity is somewhat impacted by use of AI? It could be positive impact or it could be adverse impact, but do you feel it is changing?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Again, I think absolutely AI does have an impact on creativity. I think you can use it how you want to use it, dependent on what you're putting into AI. Depends what you get out. If you start with still that creativity, so going back to the example of what you've got in the fridge, if you're putting some of your own creation into it, then what you get out is you're adding the value there on top of it. What about you? What do you think?
Well, mine is pretty similar. Like you said, it's important to maintain a balance between your own creativity versus what AI is doing for you, right? So for me, the way I tend to use it is that I try to come up with the idea, right? And then try to use AI to execute on that idea. So that's completely my own personal way of using AI. But interestingly, and you'd find this intriguing, I've been reading a paper, and we'll put the link of the paper down below. In 2024, a bunch of researchers from University College London and University of Exeter conducted a research. In their study, what they did is that they sort of created 3 groups of creative people. And their creativity ranging on a spectrum. And some of them they allowed to use AI tools, some of them they didn't. So it's a really detailed and very interesting piece, and I would encourage everyone to read through it. But what really stood out from that read for me was 2 things. First, wherever ideas were generated by AI, the average creativity, when independently assessed, it turned out that AI's creativity is better than the average human creativity, but not better than peak human creativity.
And what was the second one?
Well, the second one is even more interesting. It turns out that wherever AI-generated ideas were used, the end outcome was very similar, right? There was no great variation in ideas, right? So it sounds like AI, when you're asking it to create ideas, it is producing more than average creative ideas, but they are sort of all the same. Whereas human creativity can sort of range from really stupid to really clever.
That's so interesting. And I think, if I remember, based on this study as well and what you were telling me, they asked AI to generate the ideas and not just write the stories based on the human ideas.
That is the point, right? So that is going back to what I was saying. So it's much safer for now to use your own ideas. If you're using AI, do not overly depend on AI to generate ideas for you. It's always better if you have generated ideas and then use AI to help you execute on those ideas.
Yeah, and maybe that's the recipe for coexisting with AI with that
Could
sort
be
of level
at least for the foreseeable future. That's the way we see it.
Yeah, with that understanding instead of kind of the fear.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think with that message, we're out of time for this pilot episode of AI+U. Please don't forget to hit the subscription button and the bell icon for the notification as well. Here's Becky.
And here is Swag, signing out.